Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Exalted One and welcome back to Heroes University. Today we are with episode number 7, and that is going to be with one of the most important parts of the competitive game, and that is drafting. Now, drafting is important in many different ways. When you get to the higher levels and the higher echelon of the tiers, or even in the lower parts of the competitive play for like Hero League or Team League, drafting is a very integral part of your success. It sets your team up either to be completely smashed by heroes that are strong in the current meta, or you can give your team a monster advantage or a great wombo combo that you can use against the enemy team to push you towards victory. Now, we're going to break it up. Instead of going towards a very meta-focused kind of video, what we're going to do is just give you the tools yourself to understand the different concepts of what goes into a draft, what makes a good draft, and what people are thinking of, and what things you need to be thinking of to be moving into these drafts and to understand and to think critically of what you're doing and what you're trying to think about for different heroes and what you're banning, what you're doing, all of that kind of stuff today. Now, those 8 different parts we're going to break it down into. Number 1, preparedness. Basically, are you prepared for draft play? Do you understand what that means? Number 2, user interface and drafting. So what the draft looks like, what you do, what are bans, anything like that at all. We're going to cover through that. Number 3, maps. Because it does tell you what map you're going to be focused on. You need to understand what that means, what that map is going to focus on, what you need to understand or to think about when you're going into the draft for that particular map that you're going to be focused on. Number 4, bans, and when to use them, what to do, what that means, and what you can or how you can structure your ban turns for your team to make sure that you get an advantage in every single draft that you are a part of. Number 5, coming through with communication and what that means and how important that is for your draft, and talking to your teammates and how important that can be. Number 6, team composition is one of the most important parts, and understanding what a standard comp, if you will, is, and what that really focuses around, or what you're looking for, what pieces you need to put in on your team to make sure that you have a full team and a well-rounded team as well. And finally, something that I wanted to cover was anti-salt, or being positive, or how to try and focus on something positive rather than getting pissed off, rather than flaming your team, and rather than being that toxic person that MOBAs are known so much for. So let's go ahead and jump in real quick with preparedness. Now, of course, the first question you want to ask yourself while you're looking into either Hero League, Team League, or even unranked draft, even though those requirements are pretty different in what actually gets you into those modes, you still want to ask yourself a few basic questions. Now, first off, are you prepared for those style of games? Do you have a variety of heroes? So, not necessarily saying you need to have all the heroes in the game, far from it. You can go in with just a few different heroes, in particular for unranked or for Team League. But do you have a variety of heroes, or can you play multiple classes? So if by chance no one else on your team is able to play a healer, can you? Can you fill that role? Can maybe you play a specialist, an assassin, a tank? Are you able or competent enough on a hero, even if it's just 1 or 2? Can you fill that role? Can you fit that position for your team? Because if you are able to, and you do understand the basics of every single class that's going to be in the game, you are at a very, very strong position for your team. And it makes sure that whatever someone is a specialist on or particularly good at, they can do that. So if someone's only good on assassins and they suck at everything else, and they get stuck playing a healer, your team is going to have a bit of a fucking hard time. But if you give that person an assassin, they might be able to carry your whole team through to victory. They might be that good on one particular style of hero that they can carry your entire team. And so the best idea is to make sure that you are aware enough and can fill the positions, because if you're able to dole out the positions or the roles that people are best at, your team's going to be in a much better place instead of everyone mismatching and playing things that they're not comfortable with or don't feel confident on. So making sure that you just have a base understanding even of those heroes for like unranked or for Team League, it's going to give you a better position, and you're going to feel much better about going into games. And especially when you win on a kind of character, a particular role that you're not fantastic at, or you're not comfortable, or you don't feel like you're at your own standards for your game, it feels amazing to get a win on that. because you took one for the team. You decided, hey, I will make sure that we can fit our team and build a composition that's going to make sense and can win. And then you, because of your selflessness, made sure that everybody else won as well. And pushing that forward feels fantastic. And I would definitely recommend having that before you start playing in draft style modes, because that ability to fill roles is very, very important. All right, next up, we are taking a look at the user interface in the actual screen for the draft and how that functions. Now, we have a little clip here, and I'm just going to walk over everything that we go through in those particular screens. All right, and this was just on a quick unranked draft that we had available. The game pops, and immediately the first thing that's going to pop up for you is the map that you're going to be focused on. For this example, Battlefield of Eternity. So you're looking for single target damage on the Immortals to be able to win that phase. Our team, the blue side on the left, gets the first ban, which means that we get not only the first ban, which is in the top left corner, and the first pick that we get with that as well. So the guy on the very bottom here with that crown does get the opportunity or the privilege to ban. The red team is going to be able to follow up after that first ban and have their choice for doing so. So in this particular sense, our first ban was on Samuro, who is a very strong meta hero at this time. The enemy team, the red team, is going to be able to choose their particular ban as our team starts to kind of focus on what particular heroes we're looking for. So we only have one pick, and right now that looks like it's going to be Sylvanas. From there on out, we're looking, so she's a ranged specialist, so she's able to push down lanes quite well. We have a melee assassin that's hovered after that. Varian is banned by the enemy team, so it kind of messes up towards the later part of our draft that one of our players is looking towards. So we're looking and discussing right now about what options are available. We get our first pick, which means that the enemy now at this point gets 2 picks, which is going to be highlighted there by the spinning nexus symbols that are going to float by there. So the enemy team gets to choose 2 heroes, back to us for another 2, and then into the ban phase. So basically 1, 2, 2, second ban phase, 2 on the red team, 2 back towards the blue team, and then the last the last one on the red team for that. So basically 1, 2, 2 bans, 2, 2, 1. So it splits it up right in the middle of that. The enemy team goes with a specialist and an assassin. Very kind of specialist for this. Lunara, very good at burning down the Immortals as well, that single target damage. Thrall does very well. And the choice that I went with was Vala. So both auto attack damage. However, Thrall is melee, and Vala obviously is a ranged assassin. And she also does very good single target damage. So being able to balance between those two, and heroes asking the friendly team if that was going to be an option that they wanted to go with. They did agree, so I go ahead and lock that in. So now that our team has 3, because we got the first pick, the enemy team does get the first ban in that second phase. So they get their option here. Our team, which the last person on our team did say that they would tank, which is why I went with an assassin at this point. But we are fairly balanced. Now that we have Johann, at least looks like immediately, as our tank. And then we have Lily as a healer. Malfurion did slide through and probably would have been a great option there because he is so strong in the meta at the moment. But Morales being banned on the enemy team, we're able to follow up with a ban on a healer, which, with Malfurion being as strong as he is a good decision. They get the immediate next next pick. So we want to make sure that we ban out any of those very, very strong healers. So the enemy team gets to choose. Likely in this kind of way, they're looking to take some of the last healers that are going to be available on the map, and possibly a tank, though none have been chosen or banned other than Varian, which he's kind of a weird split and not a great tank, at the current time at least. So the enemy team getting those 2 picks, and we will follow up to round out the last of our team before their final pick. So the enemy team, even though the first pick is obviously such a huge advantage, the enemy getting that last pick means that if we had a glaring weakness on our team, the enemy could decide to choose a counter if it was still available. So at this point, we have Lily for a blind that's going to be on pretty much their only damage dealer right now, Lunara. Uther does have a stun. Muradin does have a stun. So we need to make sure that we're aware of what the enemy team has, which right now is pretty heavy on the stuns. So we need to make sure that we understand that we're going to position safely, or make sure that we follow in Johanna to the fights and the engagements. And the enemy team rounding out with Li Ming, that damage dealer. So their team having auto attack damage, a specialist, a ranged damage, a healer, and a tank as well. Now, next up is number 3. We have maps. Now, it tells you what map you're going to be playing as you go into the actual draft. Now, the first things, as soon as that pops, as soon as you get into that draft screen, you want to be thinking about what you can do to take advantage of this map, or what heroes you can gain to be able to take advantage of the particular aspects of the map that you're going to be playing on. Now, first question that you immediately think of, what map are you playing on? So that, it's clear, it's right there and it tells you. But what are you going to be doing on that map? What is the objective for that map? Are you going to be holding capture points like Brax's Holdout or Dragonshire? Maybe Rexar is going to be fantastic because he can use Misha to capture the point, still be in lane, soaking experience, doing 2 things at once, and making sure that he can control that because Misha is damn near indestructible. So she can stay on that point and make sure that you capture those last few seconds on Braxis, so that hold that point for just a moment longer on Dragonshire. Are you going to be pushing objectives? Is it like the Eternal Battleground or Battlefield? Are you going to be playing on Infernal Shrines, where you can get a neutral objective to be pushing for you? Can Sylvanas come in and destroy those towers, or to negate them so that the objective doesn't take more damage? Are you playing on a large map? Are you playing on a small map? Large maps, you got to be thinking about globals. And can Falstad, Brightwing, Dahaka, can they help you out? Because they're able to be everywhere. You can rotate faster than the enemy team if you pick up a hero like that. Is it a small map? Is it like Tomb of the Spider Queen, where maybe Zool can move back and forth between lanes and clear that and open up your friendly team to be ganking and to be moving in between lanes? Do you have heroes that have stuns to be able to facilitate ganking and securing kills and disrupting the enemy team gaining experience? Now, is there an objective to kill minions? So you'd be looking for like AoE mages. So like Kel'Thas, Jaina. You can even get like Kerrigan because she can ravage and jump between multiple enemies. And that's going to be, again, on like Infernal Shrines, where you have the neutral point. If you kill enough of the minions, you gain the objective towards your side. Or even Zool in that scenario, because he's able to wipe down multiple enemies at once at that AoE area. Even Sonya, spinning around in circles, hitting that area of effect damage with her smash as well. See, something to think about all that time. Even with wave clear maps, Zool, Sylvanas, Zagara, strong laners that can push down and get the lane moving in the right direction. Zool and Sylvanas, like in particular, can move between multiple lanes. Zool is one of the best, if not the best hero in the game at moving and rotating between lanes himself and clearing waves. So in an example, we have like Blackheart's Bay. Zool is very, very strong in the top and mid lanes because they're so short and they're so close to each other. He's able to rotate and continue to gain that experience while the friendly team is rotating around, killing heroes, gaining the coins, and doing that PvE aspect of that map that makes sure that you gain the advantage, gain those turn-ins, and have the experience advantage all the way through that. So definitely always when you get on a map, you have to be immediately thinking, who's strong here? What hero is going to be fantastic? And even if you don't have the particular name of a hero, you can just start out and think, well, what are we going to be doing? Do I need to stand on a point? Do I need to gank and try and kill heroes? Do I need to try and wipe down waves? Are there going to be multiple objectives that I need to try and destroy that are going to push towards my forts? All of those questions are valid and something to think about every time that you get into a draft, because you know the map ahead of time and you can build your composition to accentuate that map and what works well for that particular map. Now, next up at number 4, we have bans and what that particularly means. I mean, we walk through that on the UI and how the draft actually functions, but in particular, what do you use your bans for? What do you want that for? And how does that help you? Now, one of the best ways that you can approach it is who you either want to ban or who you want to pick. Now, every time that the game rotates through a particular meta, there's at least about 2 or 3 heroes that are substantially stronger or absolutely tier 1 heroes that are going to be fantastic regardless of what map they're on. And those particular heroes are of a high contention on actually picking those, or you want those on your team. And most games approach it as in you have to ban one, and then the enemy team bans the second one. And so then you're stuck with, well, then nobody gets like one of the considered overpowered heroes for that particular meta. Now, if your first pick and your first pick player, can play both of them, why would you ban one of those? So what it means is that if you ban maybe a third character that isn't one of those two, because for the most part it always rotates through about two heroes in particular that are incredibly strong or very, very strong on any map that you're going to be playing on. So if you ban something else, maybe a character that's really great for that map, so like Sylvanas on Braxis Holdout or on Infernal Shrines, something where she gains so much value, but say you want to pick another hero that's really strong at the time, well, maybe then ban Sylvanas. Then make sure, because you only get one pick at the beginning, that means that, well, if they ban one of the top two heroes at the time, you get one, and then the enemy doesn't get any, and they don't have their next option like Sylvanas that would be strong on a particular map like that. So you've not only forced your enemy into picking which character that they want to play against, but then you also force out another option for them. You're going deeper into their possibilities and cutting down their options. So always, when you have first pick in particular, always ask if there's two particular heroes that are fantastic or very, very strong at that moment. You can ask whoever is going to be first up in your draft if they can play both. If they can, do not ban one of those. Ban something else. That forces your enemy, again, to choose the way that they want to possibly lose. And that feels terrible. And right out the gate with one pick, one ban, you're already setting up the enemy team for failure. And that's how you can immediately, with one choice, set up your team for a win and set up the enemy to be arguing between themselves about which way they were going to ban. Now, as well, ban your counters. So if you are Illidan, you know that you do not want to be against strong crowd control, and you don't want to be against people that are able to knock you back, keep you out of the fight. So playing against like an Uther feels fucking bad. Playing against a Muradin, it still kind of sucks, because if he hits you with that Q, you're pretty well fucked, and he can get in your way and just screw up your whole day. And if you're going on Illidan, or even Brightwing, because she can polymorph you, and you're just absolutely fucked at that point. So if you're Illidan, you know that you're going to hold on to that. And maybe you're later in the draft, in particular for Illidan. We'll get into that at another point down the road. But if you know that you're going to be going that later in your draft, you can ban out, say, the Brightwing, that's one of the strongest counters to Illidan. You can ban her out earlier so that you know that that's not going to be a problem. You want to set up your team for whatever you know your weakness is going to be, or whatever heroes that your team is hovering and looking to and thinking of in their minds is that's where our team composition is going to go. And a particular hero can stop that or disrupt it or hurt a part of your composition by themselves. You want to make sure to try and ban them and to prevent that. You can also, though, use it as a disruption for the enemy team. So say that there's, two very strong healers at the time. Well, you got one maybe earlier in the draft, and the enemy team hasn't picked up another healer. Maybe they ban the other one. Well, then now there's only a few different healer options, so you want to cut down that pool of possibilities for them even further. You want to push them further down a possibility on a tier list, or whoever's strongest at that particular time at a given role that the enemy needs. You can cut that down. You can make them choose from a smaller group or something that's more of a niche pick instead of something that can be strong overall. Now, let's go ahead and hop into communication and why that's so important and why it ties into all of these concepts between map and bans in particular and composition that we'll be talking about in just a moment. Now, next up is what I feel is probably the most important thing that I want to stress during this video, and that is going to be communication and how important that can be and how quickly that can turn your team from, just a group of randos to a group that can actually act as a team, communicate, and achieve victory by the decisions that you make as a team and moving forward and feeling connected more to those people that you're playing with. The easiest ways to do that, number one, be fucking positive. If you're being a dickhead, if you're just being an ass for no reason right out the gate, if you're not talking or saying anything or being part of the team right away, then why are people going to try and want to help you win? What's the incentive to that? Why do you want to work with someone that's going to sit there and be a potato versus someone that's going to be active and actually try and strategize with the team and try and help you achieve victory? You always want to be positive, because even if people are trying to be negative, if someone comes in and they're pissed or if they're on tilt, if you're positive and like, yeah, let's fucking do this. Let's go. Let's get this win right now. Let's go. We got this, team. They're going to instantly feel a little bit less pissed, because they can have a little confidence that, hey, this team's actually going to pay attention. They're going to try. And the goal that you can try and accomplish with being positive like that, and almost obnoxiously so. I get into a game and I'm immediately like, hi team, hey, how is everyone doing? And immediately say like, hey, just as a heads up everybody, I can play whatever role we need, but I'm not really that strong on support. It's not my favorite role. It's not my strongest position. So if I can tank or whatever you guys need me to play, I can do that. But if someone else is a stronger support, then definitely take that. Try and communicate that in some kind of way. And your team is not going to know those kind of things unless you tell them. So you want to immediately communicate what roles you play. Try and ask them what roles they play or what they feel most comfortable on. And you can immediately start talking to them. Once you get them into that idea, you can start talking about bands, map, objective, your compositions. Anything like that at all opens up those doors, because you're not being a dick. And that's one of the best parts of that concept of just being positive, of trying to interact with your team, is that it opens up the doors to you succeeding later on, because they aren't going to hate you. And with so many trolls in a MOBA, with so many people on tilt and getting pissed off, if you can stop that a little bit, if you can cut that down, it's not only going to help you out and make you less salty, but it's going to help them out as well, and they're going to want to stick together. You're going to be able to meet people that want to duo queue with you, that want to set up team leagues, things like that. If you're open to it and wanted to achieve that, very easy way is to just be positive and to communicate with your team, whether that's through pings, typing, anything like that at all. In particular in the draft, saying hello, being engaged in that chat is going to be very, very important, and that sets up right into our composition talk. As well, though, with communication, don't be afraid to give ideas or suggestions. So you can say, hey, let's try and make a team around this kind of idea. Let's get a composition like this. Or, maybe let's ban this particular hero. Your input on bans, it might not be the best. It might not be perfectly accurate. But if you have some justification or some idea, maybe that person in that ban slot or the person that's banning, maybe they don't have an idea. Maybe they don't think about it. Maybe it's not normally their role to be the person banning. And so saying that or putting that out there to the team is helpful regardless. So even if you don't know 100% what you're talking about or have a perfect reason, if you have some justification for what you're saying, or just an idea in general, or a hero that you don't want to play against, your team likely will support that. All right, and down to the meat and potatoes of the draft is what your composition is going to be. Now, in general, obviously, I wanted to say that we were going to stay away from meta, but the idea of a standard composition is typically going to be like a warrior, a support, 2 DPS, and a specialist. So why that's the standard is it gives you a front line, so between your warrior being right there in front of your team, soaking up some of that damage, using their crowd control, knocking the enemy team back towards your damage dealers. The support to keep your team alive, of course, and to try and provide a little bit of utility for your team. Your main DPS usually is either going to be between melee or ranged assassin, typically. You have a specialist that's going to help your pushing power or your potential to have strength on the map and to be pressuring the enemy team at all times. And another DPS you can use as almost like a flex. So usually you wouldn't want to have like 2 specialists for the most part. This is all in general. You wouldn't typically have a second specialist because you're going to be overloaded and not have damage potential to be getting kills. A second DPS is usually the major choice because you can balance your damage between auto attacks and ability damage, between burst and sustain, between melee and ranged, and all of that is going to be able to benefit your team. Now, there are many compositions that go double tanks, double supports, and those definitely work. And against certain compositions or certain heroes, those things can get even more value. But in general is what we're kind of talking about. That's the idea, is that you have your warrior, your support, your main DPS, your specialist, and then your off DPS. So usually you'd want to balance that between like auto attack and mage, or between auto attack and some kind of ability damage that's closer to that. Hell, even between like a ranged assassin like Raynor and a Thrall, for example. Someone that's going to be on the front lines and someone that's going to be on the back, being able to open a can of whoop ass on the enemy team. Now, as well, something to think about, don't always be concerned with 100% of the meta or 100% of standard comp. There are always goofy things that can work, and it just depends on your team, your playstyle in particular, and what you decide as a team to do. Because if you're all on board and you think that something can work, then fucking go for it. Because it's much better and you're much more invested if you have an idea and want to make something work than just trying to force yourselves into something that may be weak. Now, as well, every time that you go into a draft, you want to be thinking about how the heroes on your team fit together. There's always going to be a few very strong heroes, and you want to shoot for them early in the draft. But then what can you fill, or what can work with that? What synergizes well with your team, or what can you build a wombo combo off of? One of the oldest ones in the book is ETC and Jaina, because ETC can jump in, do a mosh pit, and be hitting everyone around that. And as soon as that's almost over, you can immediately drop like a Ring of Frost on that. Or while they're in the mosh pit, Jaina can drop her Blizzard on top of them and absolutely chunk everybody, if not kill everybody in that mosh pit, almost by herself. And then you can either drop out Water Elemental or hit that Ring of Frost, and they're not able to move for several seconds while you hit them between those two ultimates. Or Tyrande and Myrddin is one of the oldest in the book. Not even on ultimates by any means. Tyrande stun into a Myrddin stun, or vice versa. Whatever works out the easiest for your team and your heroes in particular, that's stun locking someone there for quite some time. And even though that's gone out of meta, at least at this point, it's still very strong. And you can think about all of those combinations that can fit together, because there are a huge amount of combinations or wombo combos between heroes that can work out very, very well. The last thing you want to think about in every single draft, and as you're choosing your heroes and talking to your team about what's going to work best, is whether or not you counter the enemy team or if the enemy team counters you. We used the example Illidan earlier. So if you see that the enemy team has not banned Brightwing, and they go and they choose Illidan right before your team gets to pick, well, if you don't have your healer already, Brightwing is going to be a fantastic option. She almost completely negates any value that Illidan's going to get, because as soon as he jumps in, you can polymorph him and your team can immediately blow him up because he doesn't have such a large health pool. So immediately you're negating almost all of the value or all of the reason to take a particular hero on the enemy team because you took their direct counter. And nearly, or a large portion of heroes in the game have a hard counter, have a hero that matches up to them quite well, or can sustain against them, can do well, or can beat them in what they do. Now, so that would be even like stuns versus ETC, or some kind of interrupts for his mosh pit, though that's kind of fallen out recently, or dive versus Morales. So if you're thinking of heroes that can dive in, so you think Kerrigan, a Diablo, Illidan, anything like that at all that can get in and get in Morales' face, because her healing output is so immense, it's hard to get to that back line sometimes. So if your team can just jump in on her and just go absolutely ham, she's toast, and then everyone else scatters and is just torn apart at that point. A Morales comp dies immediately to that dive. And so if you see that they're building towards a particular way or towards a particular idea, you can set up your team to draft the opposite of that, and set up where your team just face-to-face with one versus the other, A versus B. Yours will be better every time if you set that up right. Of course, the enemy team is going to be trying to do things like that as well, but in particular, when you're starting the game and learning, having those concepts in mind and having that thought process and thinking about the draft, your hero, the map, bans, communication on your team, thinking of all of those things critically can make sure that you push yourself forward. All right, and the very last thing that I wanted to touch on was going to be anti-salt or anti-tilt, making sure that you're not getting super pissed at the game, within reason at least, because there's always going to be times where it's going to get irritating, and that's because it is a competitive game. But there are a few things that you can do to make sure that you keep yourself at a pretty even keel and can make sure that you not only make sure that you don't get a little bit tilted, but make sure that your team as well is on the right side of that spectrum. Now, first up is always being positive. I mentioned that earlier a little bit with saying that you want to be positive in communication and in talking to your team. But even when things are going poorly, so if someone is not playing all that well, you want to be encouraging. You want to be, the uplifting spirit for your team. Because even if someone's not playing all that well or is feeding early game, you still have the opportunity to come back later. So if you're a dick at the 3-minute mark, they're going to hate you at the 16-minute mark and want to make sure that you either lose or that they're not going to really want to have the desire to try anymore because you're such an asshole. So if you're positive up front, you're going to continue to exude that, and I'm ridiculously positive, obnoxiously, saying things like, I believe in you, like, we can absolutely do this, let's take this and we can absolutely win this, if we win this fight, this game is over, we are going to crush them. Saying stuff like that is, a little bit goofy, but in the moment when you're in the game, it actually fits. And that's been something, and the most important thing that I focused on over this last season was being more positive and being less salty. And damn if it hasn't worked out. I've climbed almost a full tier in Hero League in primarily solo queues. I've met quite a few people that now, because of that, I duo queue with and have played games with and that are around my level. And have met several different people that I'm working with and doing content for and with and making partnerships and all of that kind of thing. And that's because I've opened the door to not being such a dick about things and not being an asshole in the game and not flaming people unnecessarily. There's no reason to do that, and it's never going to get the desired effect that you want. So there's no reason to even do it. You don't feel better for flaming somebody, and the person getting flamed sure as hell doesn't feel any better about it. So be fucking positive. Be that good force in the Nexus. Be that good part of the community that every MOBA should have. And if we can just kick out a few of those fucking negative vibes or that negative energy or those people that are being assholes in the Nexus, it's going to be a much better place. Now, always as well, learn from your mistakes. Because if there's anything that's going to be frustrating is you flaming or being an asshole about it and then not taking any blame for yourself. You're a part of every single aspect of the team fight. You may have done everything perfect in your character mechanically, but did you make a poor decision? Did you engage when your team maybe wasn't all the way there? Did something happen where your decision making wasn't at its peak? Or did something happen where your team was engaging, you were behind them saying, no, don't do that, at least to yourself, but did you ping it? Did you put that on the map? Did you put it in chat? Did you say something to prevent that from happening? And if you didn't, then that's again something to improve on. So there's almost always an opportunity to improve on your decision making, to improve on your mechanical play, or to improve on your positioning. Somewhere in any of that, there's going to be something that was a little bit off or wasn't ideal or perfect. And you should always take that opportunity to learn, grow, and improve. And finally, just a few of the last little things. Whatever you can do to be better, definitely do that. Because even if it's just by attitude, if you're a perfect mechanical player, but you're an asshole, no one's going to want to play with you, and they're not going to try, and you're going to build actually trolls that'll come just to fuck with you. Now, personally, I've played, I believe, almost 1,200 games. 1,200 games with 4 other players in each different match. Yeah, I've played a couple games with some friends. But 1,200 games with 4 other people is 4,800 different people that I've interacted with over the last year. 4,800 people. And if I'm an asshole to every single one of those, that's going to roll around. That's going to come back to me. Even if I improve, most of those other people are improving as well, and they're almost right on par with me likely. People improve at a very, pretty standard rate unless you're putting a lot of work into it, which I like to believe that I am. But still, at some point, I'm going to hit a capacity where I'm going to end up playing with people multiple times. And if I'm such an asshole that they might remember me, that's not a good thing. That's not what we're looking for, and that's not what helps build the community and make the game better. So being positive, again, is always going to come back to you in some fashion. Whether or not it's even helping yourself to not get pissed at the game, to be able to shake it off, just deal with that loss and move forward from there. I mean, you can shake your head and say, man, that was a really bad fucking play. Because I've done that, and I think there's even a video that I had with the Sonya jumping in on a Nova with the crater. God damn it, it's funny. Anyways, side note, check that video out, by the way. That was funny. But take breaks. Take a relaxed time, and just make sure that you're staying as positive and as focused as you possibly can be. Because it not only helps you out with your attitude and in how you approach the game, but it also actually helps out you mechanically and helps you move forward with your team to encourage that team atmosphere and to make the game better. But I know this was a long video. I was trying to cut it down in the places that I could, but so many things needed some explanation, and I ramble like a motherfucker. But thank you, everybody, for checking this series out. You are fucking fantastic, and I'm so glad that we've had some positive feedback on these and that they've been helpful in some kind of capacity. I know this one's probably setting the record for the longest in the series thus far, but I definitely appreciate you for checking it out, and thank you so much for stopping by. If you are new to the channel, make sure to press like, subscribe, all those fucking buttons. You know what to do, and we will see you all next time in the Nexus.